Who would have thought clearance would be so tight underneath this fire truck? It is awful low to the ground, and I don't know, that might change. Now, I was originally talking about moving these, extending this frame from here to just to the front side of this C-channel. That probably won't work that well if I want to have a bumper. Bumper is quite a bit further forward, or the front fascia of his. Well, that means I have to extend this frame probably, that's going to be 22 inches minimum to get to a good position for the bumper to bolt up to. This one had to, on this side, had to extend anyway because that's where the steering box is. Now you can't see it, but the steering hole is, I guess you can. The steering hole's right here. That's where the steering column goes. Or at least that's where it was in the fire truck. I'm going to try to maintain that because that's where it was in relation to the driver's seat. Anyways, it's got to be about here. That's the front of the motorhome frame. That's the bottom of the cab. And that's hard up against, it's resting on there. And that is about where I want it to be. That's the floor of the cab. I want the floor of the cab to be about that high off the ground. I can't really do that because that frame will have to move. The frame has to be modified in some way. If you look further back, it's actually tilted upward in an angle from about where the battery box used to be here. I'm going to end up modifying the front of both sides of this frame to be lower down a couple of inches, and that'll clear everything down here. Plus I can get it then moved forward to allow me a place to mount the steering box and the front bumper. Here's the steering box. Now it's bolted to this frame here that is doing a bunch of things. It's sloped upward, so and then it's welded. This is the end of the main frame member that's coming from the wheel. It's welded to that. It bends outward and gives an area for that to bolt into to make sure this arm is lined up with this bell crank. And this is a bell crank. It's going to have to change because that's a straight push. The wheels are straight, pointed straight forward. And this is 90 degrees to this. So I'm going to have to maintain that. Even though the steering box is going to be way up forward, that's still got to be 90 degrees. So I'll have to, and it's got to be that length, a bunch of things to consider. First things first, take off the arms that go to the steering, disconnect the hoses, and plug them somehow. Get rid of the steering box altogether. With that gone, I can take away this cross member, see what's looking at me then. I'll probably have to take these cab mounts or these body mounts off of here. And then I'll have a good clear view of what I need to change or what can be changed as far as these frame members. I don't want to lose the integrity. This is also very important to the frame. This has to be here, or something has to be in probably pretty close to this location. This was a radiator, and the cross member's got to be in front of that. So there will still have to be a cross member about here, and that's to maintain rigidity of the frame for the front suspension. So we'll have to maintain all of that, but in the short term, I'll cut it off and see how I can modify it and then kind of put some structure back in place. This is the return line from the, return line to the power steering pump. That ran the wipers and the power steering. Apparently they had troubles with the power steering unit driving the wipers, and a lot of the retrofits involve putting in electric wipers. Well, there you go. It works. 4 bolts holding it in. Okay, cool. These body mounts are welded on, there's 2 sides. It's welded down the side of the frame on the inside, on front and back, and then along the top, and that's pretty much it. kind of a sloping thing here because this frame actually fits over the top of the inner part. And so I'm just going to take the saw and cut it off. Cut it up here, both sides, and it should just come off. That'll do. It's got to be moved back here now. Or about here. Clean all these welds up, do the next one. Here's a close-up of the front frame horns. You can see how they kind of slope upward, at least I can. It's about an inch from where it's welded on here to about there, maybe an inch and a half. On this side, it's got this funny elbow, but in reality, if you continued this line straight to here, that's a straight line. You can see where it kind of stubs off there. That's a straight line from there to over here. And so this part will come off. What to do? What to do? While I was cleaning up all the welds from the body mounts that I'd cut off, and then some other work, just cleaning up welds and getting things organized, I've leveled up the frame. The level's back there. Don't know if you can tell, but that's level. When I go to the side rails, that's level. So is the other side. Or jack stands. And that's level. So the frames are all level. Measure to the inside here, and that should come out, if I hold it right, that is 29 and 3/4. And I want to move this piece down about 1.5 inches, 2 inches. Now, okay, so it slopes backward. And when I get to about this point, which just happens to be where that inner frame rail ends, that's roughly 28 inches, a little under. Well, it gets me 1 3/4 inches, so that's pretty darn good. I was thinking about just making a pie cut here and on that side, and just making these two frame horns level. That doesn't get me where I need to be though, and plus it leaves it a bit obstructed. These little parts that bend outward make it strong, but I need the end of it to be out here, another 2 feet. So I have decided I'm just going to cut these off at about here, which gives me my 2-inch level change from here to the going forward. Now this is a pretty complex piece. I'm just going to cut it off flat. On the inside it's not welded, but it is certainly welded all around here. I have to grind all those out. This piece comes off. Well, I'll cut it off and then I'll just work on taking that off, cleaning up those welds. This will just be cut off. And I've got the material outside that came from the original frame from the motorhome. And I've measured the web here. This piece is 5.5. This piece on the inside is 5. So I have some 5.5 outside, and I've got the main frame rails, which are 6. And I can make all that work, use that to extend these out. They do 2 different sizes, and I'll go up from this point, where it just starts bending outward. Where that bends outward, from here going forward, is 38 inches, and that'll put this piece, or a cross member like this, will be right behind the fascia on in the front of the cab. And it does everything I need it to do. All right, cool. Right, so this will be 40 inches. I don't need 38, but give myself some room to play with. I'll make 2 of them. Ooh, this is one 30 thousandths thicker. This is 30 thousandths thicker. I'm not too worried about that because this frame used to have, you know, it used to have the bumper and it was heavy duty. I don't know what their thoughts were when they made it so heavy. It's not that heavy back there where it carried most of the weight. So it must have to do with collision safety or I don't know what. This material, even though it's going to go on the outside, I reckon I'll box it. This part here is much wider. It's almost as wide as this. 2.6 inches. And that's 2.6 inches. So this is as wide as that. I just have to box it on one side. It'll be pretty strong enough. At the end of the day, all it's going to be carrying is the rear cab mount goes here, roughly. And all this is going to carry is the bumper and the front cab mount about here. It'll be strong enough. Boy, look how far that sticks out in front. It's amazing. Whew. It's a long ways. Really, the cab mount's here. All the rest of this is just a place to mount the bumper. On this side will be the steering box. It's a start. All right, next, let's prep them for weld. This is how the frame came from the factory. I cut it off here. This part was hidden. There was another bracket welded on here that went around and held the steering box. Okay, so that's this is a little bit less than an inch, depending on where you measure. And I just put the level on it. Somehow or other, they managed to make that square level, even though that frame is actually sloping upward quite a bit. They've cut that flat. Okay, so why do I mention this? I was thinking I was going to slot that new member on here. I was just going to cut a little tab back 2 inches and then slope it back this way and have a nice long broad weld along the edge and then weld it along the bottom. Well, I can't do that because I can do that on that side because that's all the way out here. But this one's back an inch. So what this forces me to do, even though my 40 inches, 38 to here, 40 to here, even though that 40 inches goes to there, I'm going to have to lose a little bit of that. Or, you know I'd left some extra in front. I'll just, from this point, I'm going to cut this off. This part's going to be cut off to match this. I'll match that one the same. I'll measure from that point there, the upper mount, get the same measurement in both places. This will be cut square, like it is, perpendicular to the ground right now. And yeah, and that'll allow me to still do my little tab here, and then I'll have it cut down this way to finish my weld and finish up down here. Yeah, that's the new plan. Okay. Anyways, mirror images. One 3/4. And back this way. Yeah, that's better. Okay. I've got the extensions on the frame. You just kind of tack welded in there. It looks like the frame horns weren't actually parallel with each other on the frame, because the way I lined them up was with the straight edge. They were both going outward pretty dramatically. So decided to not line them up with that, and I've just decided to make square them up from the front of the frame horns to the end there. And now they're pretty good. Up till now, I've been moving the frame, the chassis, underneath the cab. And well, now that I got the chassis all leveled up and stuff, I don't want to move it. So I'm going to try to jack up the cab and move it over the chassis. Let's see how that goes. This is what it looks like underneath. This C-channel here is not a cab mount. It's just a support for the floor. The cab mount is up above that pulley for the air conditioning compressor. The forward cab mounts is that big C-channel. Now I've just about got it centered. The problem is, see, I've got lots of room. It's not touching here or here, but it's not centered because it's hitting that rubber. It's off by about an inch or so. Once I move that, I should be able to be pretty close to center this finally, and right there below the pulley of the air conditioning compressor is about on the frame is where I'm going to put that rear mount. The other one you can't really tell, it's over there, but just about that close. Just take this rubber off and line it up. I need to tell you that getting that rubber isolation out of there was not any fun in the slightest. That was all vulcanized on there. It took a while. Anyways, I'm successful now. I'm just putting in my spacers here. I think this should work. Right now the cab is too far forward. I need to move it backward, probably an inch or so, maybe an inch and a half. Well, then again, yeah, I need to move the cab back. Okay. The other thing I'm aiming for is the cab's got to be centered fore and aft, side to side, front and back, and also level. The frame I know is level. So I've tested that a bunch of times. Now, this cab has a handy little place here. There's a bit of a trim here. I need to space it out. Make sure I'm even so I'm everywhere. That'll do. Little spacer. Good, that's level. I think it is centered fore and aft. Just look at it. I think it's centered fore and aft. I just used the tire and measured to the inside of the wheel well, inside of the fender. It's 10 1/4, front and rear on this side and the other. I've got my spacer blocks in there, so I know the cab is good side to side, both front and back. And the only thing I have to worry about now is it's level. I know it's resting on the front frame. It's just resting there. And really the rubber bushings that I'm going to be using are probably about an inch high. So the whole cab's coming up about an inch. But right now it's resting hard on those frames, the extensions that I put on. I'm going to let the chain loose and see if the cab just sits there. In this about 3 and nearly 4 feet, 1/8 of an inch low in front. Fine, it looks like it's got a rake. That'll work. We're good. That heavy box section piece of metal is the main support for the rear of the cab. I've got that block cut just resting on the frame. That's 13 7/8, not that that matters. The cab mount that I'm going to weld back on the frame will take up some of that, and then all the rubber bushing takes up another inch or so. All I have to do then is just make sure it's spaced side to side and vertical, and put my dropper, downcomer, whatever you want to call it, dropping down from that member down to the cab mount, and that will be in position. And then do the fronts. I can securely weld the front extensions on. We should be good. Where that cross member lies on both sides, I know where the frames are, where this frame is, fore and aft and side to side. The only thing I've got to work out is the rubber mounts used to be offset on the truck anyways. They used this massive thing, which was off the side of the frame, when all the body mounts in the motorhome were like this, straight on top of the frame. This is the old original, one of the original body mounts on the motorhome. And see how that bolted on there. And it's a really heavy alloy. This is 1/2 inch thick aluminum. That's the, it's a 9/16 bolt. And it went through this bit of rubber here. And that shot down into through that hole in this plate. That's all well and good. This is an exact duplicate that I just found at a local truck supply place for a cab mount. Now it's identical, the same bolt fits and everything. It's a bit of a press fit. I haven't been able to fit this in here, but yeah, I can press it in there. Just use some soap, it'll go. The thing is, what I'm going to use for the front mounts is just a piece of frame. It's not this thick. And if I use this 1/2 inch thick thing, that means not only do I have the thickness of the rubber, I've also got the thickness of this plate on top of the frame member that I welded in there. So I've got to work that out yet. At any rate, this is about the way the cab sits. That wheel's off the ground, but when I get the bigger tire on, and then the suspension collapses a bit, that's about where it's going to sit. And it's still a really big gap between the top of that tire and the bottom of the wheel well. But I can't do anything about that. There's the air conditioning compressor. And the other thing that will interfere if I lower this cab any more will be the alternator. It just fits in that little gap there. And the air cleaner. Right now this air cleaner is, it protrudes too far up. So when I get these rubber bushings in, that'll allow enough room for that air cleaner to clear. I might end up with a bigger hole. To get this worked out on the, how I'm going to put that heavy 1/2 inch plate on top of the frame, that is going to bring this wheel well up a bit more. That's okay, plenty of clearance. I've had to cut this video here because it's gone over 20 minutes. I always try to keep that target generally around 20 minutes. I've gone over that, I've gone under that, but 20 minutes is a good target. Anyways, there is so much more video to go that I couldn't fit it in this one without being over an hour, and that's just crazy. So on the plus side, the next video won't take 2 weeks to make. It'll be within a few days. Anyways, thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Give me a thumbs up. I'll see you in the next video.